Grieve fast, then get out of my house. Those were the words my daughter-in-law, Ashley, said to me 3 days after my son's funeral. The room went completely silent. For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood her. Maybe grief was making everything sound harsher than it really was. But no. She looked directly at me from across the dining table and repeated herself. You heard me, Margaret. I need to move on with my life. You should do the same. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I simply folded my napkin, placed it beside my plate, and nodded. The next morning, I packed 2 suitcases and left. I checked into a small extended-stay hotel on the edge of Columbus. It wasn't much, just a modest room with a kitchenette, a worn armchair by the window, and a parking lot view. The kind of place traveling nurses, contractors, and people between homes often use. I stood there for a while after setting down my bags, unsure what to do next. The funeral was over. The house was behind me. Everything familiar suddenly felt far away. I wasn't falling apart. I was simply trying to figure out what life looked like now. Before I continue, I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end of my story, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Sometimes it helps to know we're not as alone as we think. 3 weeks earlier, my life had looked very different. My son, Daniel, had been only 42 years old. He wasn't supposed to go before me. No parent ever imagined standing beside a grave while watching their child being lowered into the ground. The pain settles somewhere deep inside you. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just heavy. Daniel had been my only child. After my husband passed away 12 years ago, he became the person who called every Sunday afternoon. The person who fixed things around my house. The person who still brought me soup whenever I caught a cold. He had his father's smile. And his father's stubbornness. The funeral was held on a gray Thursday morning outside Columbus, Ohio. Friends came. Neighbors came. Former co-workers came. Everyone said the same thing. He was a good man. They were right. He was. Ashley cried through most of the service. People hugged her. They brought casseroles. They told her how strong she was. I felt sorry for her. At the time, I truly did. She had lost her husband. I had lost my son. I believed grief would bring us closer. Instead, it revealed something I had been refusing to see for years. Looking back now, the signs had always been there. Small things. Quiet things. The kind of things you excuse because you want peace. Because you love your family. Because you convince yourself that tomorrow will be better. I ignored those signs. Until the night Ashley told me to grieve fast and leave. What she didn't know was that the next morning, before doing anything else, I walked into a bank branch downtown. And what I learned there changed everything. The bank branch sat on a quiet corner of downtown Columbus. It was the same bank my husband and I had used for nearly 30 years. I hadn't been there in person for a long time. Most things were done online these days. When I walked through the glass doors that morning, I wasn't looking for answers. At least, not yet. I simply wanted to review a few accounts and make sure everything was in order after Daniel's passing. Grief has a strange way of making ordinary tasks feel important. You hold on to paperwork because it gives you something concrete to focus on. Something that doesn't hurt. The young receptionist greeted me with a polite smile and asked me to wait. A few minutes later, a bank manager named Richard came out. The moment he saw my name, his expression changed slightly. Not alarm. Not confusion. Recognition. Mrs. Bennett, he asked. I nodded. Would you mind coming into my office? Something in his tone made me uneasy. Once we sat down, Richard asked for my identification and a few account details. He carefully reviewed my driver's license, compared several records on his computer, and then nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Bennett, he said. Your husband left special instructions requiring us to verify your identity before discussing certain matters. Under banking regulations, we're only permitted to release this information according to those instructions. Then he opened a file folder and looked at me carefully. I was very sorry to hear about your son. I thanked him. Then he said something unexpected. Before your husband passed away, he left very specific instructions regarding several family accounts. I blinked. My husband? Richard nodded. Yes, ma'am. He asked us to contact you personally if certain conditions were ever met. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. My husband, Frank, had been gone for 12 years. Frank wasn't the type of man who left loose ends. He planned everything. Even family vacations came with folders and handwritten notes. But he had never mentioned anything about special instructions. Richard slid a document across the desk. At the top was Frank's signature. I recognized it immediately. My hands trembled as I touched the paper. Suddenly, memories came rushing back. Frank sitting at the kitchen table. Frank balancing checkbooks late at night. Frank quietly watching people when they thought nobody noticed. He always saw more than he said. Always. Mrs. Bennet, Richard continued gently, your husband established protections that were designed to activate if family assets were ever placed at risk. The words echoed in my head. Assets at risk. I thought about Ashley. About the way she had rushed me out of the house. About how quickly she seemed ready to move on. For the first time, a question entered my mind. What if Ashley wasn't acting out of grief? What if she was acting out of something else entirely? And as Richard opened the next folder, I realized my husband may have seen this coming years before any of us did. I stared at the folders spread across Richard's desk. For a moment, I forgot about Ashley. I forgot about the house. I even forgot about my own grief. All I could think about was Frank. My husband had been gone for 12 years, yet somehow he was still protecting me. Richard carefully opened the first folder. Inside were copies of trust documents, account records, and handwritten instructions signed by Frank. Everything was organized. That was exactly like him. Frank believed that paperwork told the truth when people wouldn't. Your husband updated these documents several times before his passing, Richard explained. He was very thorough. I smiled sadly. That was an understatement. Frank had spent 40 years building a small construction company from the ground up. He trusted people, but he always verified everything. Especially when family was involved. As Richard continued speaking, pieces of the past started fitting together. Things I hadn't paid attention to before. Things I had excused. Ashley entered our lives nearly 15 years ago. At first, I adored her. She was smart. Friendly. Ambitious. She remembered birthdays. She brought flowers when she visited. She called me Mom within the first year. I thought Daniel had found someone special. Maybe he had. At least in the beginning. But over time, small things changed. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. Just little moments. Ashley gradually took control of conversations whenever money came up. If Daniel discussed investments, she answered for him. If family property was mentioned, she paid very close attention. At holiday dinners, she often asked questions about ownership. Who was listed on what? Which accounts existed? What plans had been made for the future? At the time, I thought she was simply responsible. An organized wife. A planner. Daniel always laughed and said, "That's just Ashley being Ashley." And I accepted that explanation. Because it was easier. Because families work best when people assume good intentions. At least that's what I believed. Then Richard showed me a document dated 7 years earlier. A note written entirely in Frank's handwriting. Just one sentence. One sentence that made my stomach tighten. If circumstances change unexpectedly, Margaret must review everything personally before signing anything. I read it twice. Then a third time. Frank wasn't a man who wrote warnings without reason. He had seen something. Or perhaps he had sensed something. Richard quietly slid another folder toward me. "This is the file your husband specifically instructed us to show you." I looked down at it. And for the first time that morning, I felt a chill run through me. Because printed across the top page was a name I wasn't expecting to see. Ashley Bennett. Part of me didn't want to know. Part of me was still searching for an innocent explanation. After all, Ashley had been part of our family for nearly 15 years. She wasn't some stranger who had appeared overnight. She was Daniel's wife. The mother of my grandchildren. The woman I had defended countless times when friends hinted that something felt off. I slowly opened the folder. Inside were records dating back several years. Nothing illegal. Nothing dramatic. At least not at first glance. But there was a pattern that caught my attention. Over the years, Ashley had occasionally asked questions about family assets, property records, trust structures, ownership documents. She seemed curious about how certain things were organized and planned for the future. Some of the questions involved accounts or assets she wasn't directly connected to. Not necessarily inappropriate. Just unusual enough to have been documented. Richard watched quietly while I reviewed the paperwork. Finally, he spoke. "Your husband became concerned after several inquiries were made regarding assets that were protected under the trust." I looked up. "Concerned enough to create additional safeguards?" Richard nodded. "Yes, ma'am." A strange feeling settled over me. Not anger. Not yet. Disappointment. The kind that arrives when old memories suddenly look different. I thought about family gatherings over the years. Thanksgiving dinners. Christmas mornings. Summer cookouts in Daniel's backyard. Ashley had often shown interest when conversations drifted toward finances or long-term planning. At the time, I assumed she was being responsible. She and Daniel were raising a family. It seemed natural that she would want to understand how things worked. Now I wasn't entirely sure what to think. Then Richard handed me another document. This one was newer. Only 18 months old. My stomach tightened as I read it. A request had been submitted to obtain detailed information about certain trust assets. The request had been denied. The name attached to it was Ashley's. I looked at the date again. 18 months ago. Long before Daniel became sick. Long before the funeral. Long before she told me to leave her house. That realization stayed with me. Not because it proved anything by itself, but because it suggested her interest in these matters hadn't begun recently. It had existed long before the difficult events that followed. Outside the office window, people moved along the sidewalk, carrying coffee cups and briefcases. Life continued as normal. But inside that room, something fundamental had shifted. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider a possibility I had spent years avoiding. Maybe there was an explanation I didn't yet understand. Or maybe there was more to Ashley's interest in the family's affairs than I had ever noticed. Then Richard opened the final section of the file. And what I saw there made me realize Ashley's involvement had gone much further than I ever imagined. I wasn't prepared for what came next. Richard opened the final folder and turned several pages toward me. At first, the documents looked ordinary. Account summaries. Trust records. Property information. Then I noticed a series of dates highlighted in yellow. Most of them were recent. Very recent. Just weeks before Daniel's passing. My heart sank. "Can you explain these?" I asked. Richard adjusted his glasses and nodded. Several requests were made to modify beneficiary information and gain access to certain protected assets. I stared at him. Requests? Yes, ma'am. He paused carefully. Every request was denied. For the first time that morning, I felt a wave of relief. Small. Temporary. But real. At least Frank's safeguards had worked. I looked back down at the paperwork. The requests weren't random. They all pointed toward the same goal. Greater control. Greater access. More authority over family assets. What bothered me most wasn't the paperwork itself. It was the timing. Ashley had been submitting these requests while Daniel was dealing with serious health issues. While doctor's appointments filled their calendar. While the rest of us were focused on supporting him. A memory surfaced. 6 months earlier, Daniel had called me on a Sunday afternoon. His voice sounded tired. Not physically. Emotionally. We talked about ordinary things. The weather. Football. My garden. Then there was a pause. A long one. Finally, he said, "Mom, if anything ever happens to me, promise me you'll be careful." At the time, I laughed. I told him he was being dramatic. He quickly changed the subject. I never thought about that conversation again. Until now. Sitting in that office, I heard those words differently. Maybe Daniel had been trying to tell me something. Maybe he had seen things he didn't know how to explain. Or maybe he simply sensed trouble coming. The same way Frank apparently had years earlier. Richard handed me one final document. This one wasn't about accounts. It wasn't about money. It was a letter. Written by Frank. Sealed and stored with the trust records. My hands trembled as I looked at the envelope. Across the front, in my husband's familiar handwriting, were 6 simple words. For Margaret, if the time comes. The room suddenly felt very quiet. Frank had written that letter more than a decade ago. Yet somehow, it felt as though he was speaking directly to me. And deep down, I already knew. Whatever was inside that envelope was about to change everything. I didn't open the letter right away. Instead, I held it in both hands and stared at Frank's handwriting. 12 years. That was how long he'd been gone. Yet somehow, in that moment, he felt closer than anyone else. Richard quietly left the office to give me privacy. The door clicked shut. I was alone. Just me. And the last words my husband had prepared years ago. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a 3-page letter. The paper had yellowed slightly with age. The first line made my eyes fill with tears. Margaret, if you're reading this, then something happened that worried me for a very long time. That sounded exactly like Frank. Direct. Calm. Never dramatic. I continued reading. He wrote about our life together. About the business we built. About Daniel. About the future he hoped our family would have. Then the tone changed. Frank explained that several years before his death, he had noticed behavior that troubled him. Not criminal. Not outrageous. Just patterns. Questions asked at unusual times. An unusual interest in ownership documents. Conversations that seemed more focused on assets than relationships. He never mentioned Ashley by name. Not once. That was important. Frank wasn't accusing anyone. He was documenting concerns. The way an engineer records measurements. The way a builder checks a foundation. Carefully. Methodically. Then I reached the paragraph that changed everything. If circumstances ever place you in a vulnerable position, do not sign anything without independent legal review. No matter who asks. I stopped reading. My chest tightened. Because only a week earlier, Ashley had casually mentioned paperwork. At the time, I barely noticed. We had been discussing funeral arrangements. She told me there would be a few documents to handle later. Nothing urgent. Nothing complicated. At least that's how she presented it. Now those words felt different. Much different. I kept reading. Near the end of the letter, Frank revealed the reason for the trust protections. He had created a separate structure that could only be activated by me personally. No one else. Not Daniel. Not any future spouse. Not any attorney acting without my approval. Only me. Frank knew that someday I might need protection. What he couldn't have known was how soon after Daniel's passing that protection would become necessary. As I finished the final page, Richard returned to the office. He sat down quietly. Then he asked a simple question. "Mrs. Bennet, has anyone recently asked you to sign any documents?" I looked at him. Then I slowly remembered the folder Ashley had placed on the kitchen counter 2 days before the funeral. The folder I had never opened. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. The moment I left the bank, I drove straight to the small extended stay hotel where I had checked in the night before. It wasn't fancy. Just a clean room with beige walls, a small kitchenette, and a view of the parking lot. For the first time in days, I locked the door behind me and sat in silence. Then I started thinking about that folder. The one Ashley had placed on the kitchen counter. The one she had casually pushed toward me while I was still helping choose flowers for my son's funeral. At the time, I barely glanced at it. I trusted her. More importantly, I was grieving. People don't think clearly when their world has just fallen apart. I remembered exactly what she had said. "Nothing urgent, Margaret. Just some routine paperwork we'll need eventually." Routine. The word bothered me now. Because truly routine paperwork rarely needs to be mentioned twice. Ashley had mentioned it 3 times in 4 days. Each time sounding relaxed. Each time acting as though it wasn't important. Looking back, that seemed intentional. Frank used to say that when someone insists something isn't important, that's often the first thing you should examine. I pulled out my phone and checked recent messages. There it was. A text from Ashley sent the day after the funeral. "Don't forget the documents. It'll make everything easier." At the time, I thought she was trying to help. Now I wasn't so sure. The more I replayed our recent conversations, the more details stood out. Small things. Questions about my future plans. Whether I intended to keep my house. Whether I had updated my own estate documents. Whether I was planning to move closer to family. Questions that seemed innocent when viewed separately. Questions that looked very different when placed together. As I sat there, another memory surfaced. A conversation with Daniel from about a year earlier. We had been having lunch at a small diner after church. Nothing serious. Just one of those ordinary afternoons I now miss more than I can describe. At one point, Daniel grew unusually quiet. Then he said, "Mom, if anything ever feels rushed, promise me you'll slow down and ask questions." I remember laughing and asking what brought that on. He shrugged and changed the subject. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now, sitting alone in that hotel room, I wondered if he had noticed something that bothered him but couldn't quite explain. That evening, I called the only person Frank had ever completely trusted outside our family. His longtime attorney, Michael Reeves. He had retired a few years earlier, but we still exchanged Christmas cards. When he heard my voice, he immediately recognized me. And when I briefly explained what had happened, he became very quiet. Then he said something that made my heart skip. "Margaret, before we discuss anything else, I need you to answer one question." I gripped the phone tighter. "What question?" His voice lowered. "Did Ashley ever get you to sign anything after Daniel became ill?" Suddenly, the folder on Ashley's kitchen counter felt far more important than I had realized. And for the first time, I began to wonder if someone had been counting on my grief to cloud my judgment. I didn't answer Michael's question right away. Instead, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and thought back over the past few months. Had I signed anything? The answer was simple. No. At least, not that I could remember. "Nothing comes to mind," I finally said. Michael let out a slow breath. "Good. That single word carried more weight than I liked. Why? I asked. There was a pause. Then he chose his words carefully. Because Frank was concerned that one day someone might try to use pressure, confusion, or difficult circumstances to obtain signatures they otherwise couldn't get. Pressure. Confusion. Difficult circumstances. Those words described exactly what grief felt like. After we hung up, I couldn't stop thinking. Not about Ashley. About Daniel. My son had loved his wife. Of that, I had no doubt. But love has a way of making people overlook things. I knew that because I had done the same. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Ashley. For a second, I considered ignoring the call. Instead, I answered. Her voice sounded surprisingly cheerful. Margaret, where are you? Not, how are you? Not, are you okay? Just where are you? I told her I was staying with a friend. It wasn't entirely true. But it wasn't entirely false either. I no longer felt obligated to explain everything. Oh, she said. Well, that's good. Listen, we should really finish that paperwork soon. There it was again. The paperwork. Ashley never sounded demanding. If anything, she sounded thoughtful. She asked whether I was eating properly. Whether I was getting enough rest. Then, almost seamlessly, she would shift the conversation toward practical matters. She'd mention future plans, ask whether I had considered certain legal decisions, or wonder aloud how various assets would be managed going forward. Nothing she said was inappropriate on its own. Yet somehow, every conversation seemed to circle back to documents, property, or decisions that required signatures. Always the paperwork. Never the grief. Never Daniel. Never family. I apologized and told her I needed a little more time. To my surprise, she pushed back. Not aggressively. Just enough to make me notice. It would really simplify things if we handled it this week. Simplify things. Another phrase she used often. I ended the call politely. Then I sat staring at my phone. For years, I had believed Ashley was simply organized. Efficient. Practical. Now every conversation seemed to carry a second meaning. Later that afternoon, Michael called back. This time, he had reviewed several documents connected to Frank's trust. His voice was calm. Steady. But what he said next changed the direction of everything. Margaret, I think it's time you stop reacting. I frowned. What do you mean? I mean, he said, from this point forward, you need to start observing. That advice stayed with me. Observe. Don't argue. Don't accuse. Don't reveal what you know. Just watch. And for the first time since Daniel's funeral, I stopped feeling helpless. Because while Ashley believed she was guiding the situation, she had no idea I was beginning to see the entire picture. And the more I observed, the more interesting her behavior became. Michael's advice turned out to be exactly what I needed. Observe. Nothing more. Nothing less. So that's what I did. I stopped asking questions. I stopped reacting emotionally. And most importantly, I stopped letting Ashley know what I was thinking. A funny thing happens when people believe they've already won. They become careless. Over the next 2 weeks, Ashley called almost every day. Not once did she ask how I was coping. Not once did she ask if I needed anything. Instead, every conversation somehow returned to the same subjects. The house. The trust. The paperwork. The future. Always the future. One afternoon, she casually mentioned that she had already started exploring options regarding the family property. That phrase caught my attention. Exploring options. The property she was referring to wasn't hers. Not entirely. She seemed to be talking about the house where she and Daniel had lived together, along with a small investment property Frank had purchased years earlier. Both assets were tied to family planning structures that were far more complicated than Ashley appeared to realize. Some portions were protected by structures Frank had established years ago. Structures she apparently didn't fully understand. Yet she spoke as if everything was already settled. As if ownership were merely a formality. I listened quietly. The less I said, the more she revealed. A few days later, I received an unexpected phone call from an old family friend named Carol. Carol had attended Daniel's funeral. She also happened to live in the same neighborhood as Ashley. After a few minutes of small talk, Carol hesitated. Then she said something surprising. "Margaret, I wasn't sure whether I should mention this." My stomach tightened. Mention what? Well, Ashley has been meeting with a realtor. I sat perfectly still. A realtor? Several times. The room suddenly felt smaller. Daniel had been gone less than a month. Less than a month. I thanked Carol and ended the call. Then I sat quietly by the hotel window for nearly an hour, watching traffic move through the intersection below. Thinking. Not reacting. Just thinking. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe. But the timing felt wrong. Everything felt rushed. As though someone had already created a timeline and was determined to stay on schedule. That evening, another piece of information arrived. Michael forwarded several public records for me to review. Most were routine. One wasn't. A consultation request connected to property valuation. The date matched one of the realtor meetings Carol had mentioned. I leaned back in my chair. For the first time, I stopped wondering whether Ashley had a plan. She clearly did. The real question was how much of that plan depended on me remaining uninformed. Because while Ashley seemed increasingly confident, she still didn't know something important. I had not signed a single document. And until I did, the most valuable protections Frank created remained completely untouched. Which meant the game Ashley thought she was winning had not actually started yet. 3 days later, Michael called with a suggestion. "I think it's time." I knew exactly what he meant. For weeks, Ashley had assumed I was confused. Vulnerable. Alone. There was no reason to correct that assumption. But now we needed answers. Real answers. Michael arranged a private trust review at his office on the north side of Columbus. It wasn't a hearing. It wasn't a legal battle. It was simply a scheduled review of documents connected to Frank's estate planning. The kind of meeting that happens quietly every day in law offices across America. The morning of the review, I arrived early. Michael greeted me and led me into a conference room. Over the next several minutes, a few professionals joined us. Richard from the bank. An attorney who had assisted with estate matters years earlier. A financial advisor who had worked with Frank on long-term planning. Most of them already knew one another. They had all played some role in helping Frank organize his affairs over the years. The atmosphere was calm and professional. Coffee cups sat on the table. Folders were opened. Notes were compared. No one was there to argue. No one was there to accuse anyone of wrongdoing. The purpose was simply to verify how the trust documents functioned and whether any actions needed to be taken following Daniel's passing. One by one, the documents were reviewed. Trust records. Property agreements. Beneficiary designations. Administrative instructions. As the review continued, I began to understand how carefully Frank had planned. Years earlier, he had placed certain assets into structures designed to provide long-term protection under a variety of circumstances. Financial hardship. Legal disputes. Changes within the family. The documents reflected years of thoughtful planning rather than any reaction to a single event. At one point, Michael handed me a document. "Margaret, have you ever seen this before?" I shook my head. The document outlined instructions that could only be activated through my direct authorization. Not automatically. Not through inheritance. Not through marriage. Only through my decision. Until then, certain assets would remain exactly where Frank intended them to remain. Protected and unchanged. The professionals continued reviewing the paperwork. Occasionally someone clarified a provision or explained how a particular section operated. No dramatic conclusions were announced. No surprises were revealed in a theatrical way. Instead, a consistent picture emerged from the documents themselves. As I listened, I thought about Ashley's confidence. The realtor meetings. The repeated requests for signatures. The urgency. Gradually, everything began to make sense. She wasn't necessarily acting out of bad faith. It seemed more likely that she had formed assumptions about the estate that didn't match the actual documents. And those assumptions had shaped her plans. By the end of the review, the records were clear. Several of the outcomes Ashley appeared to expect were not supported by the trust structure Frank had created. Not in the way she imagined. As everyone gathered their papers, Michael turned toward me. "There's one final step." I looked at him. "What step?" He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a formal notice that would clarify ownership, authority, and trust protections once and for all. The notice would be delivered within days. And when Ashley received it, she was going to learn something she had never expected. She had been making plans around assets she didn't actually control. The notice was delivered on a Tuesday afternoon. I know because Ashley called me less than 2 hours later. For the first time since Daniel's funeral, she sounded rattled. Not angry. Not yet. Confused. "Margaret," she said, trying to sound calm, "I received some documents from an attorney's office." I sat quietly in my hotel room and looked out the window. "I see." There was a pause. A long one. Then she continued. "I think there must be some misunderstanding. A month earlier, I would have immediately tried to reassure her. I would have asked what was wrong. I would have looked for a way to help. Instead, I listened. Ashley began talking faster. The protected trust. The ownership structure. The restrictions. The review process. One by one, she mentioned every issue the notice had raised. Without realizing it, she was confirming exactly how much she had expected to control. When she finally stopped talking, I asked a simple question. "Did you speak with an attorney?" Silence. Then she admitted she had. Not one attorney. Two. Neither had given her the answer she wanted. By the end of the call, her confidence was gone. The certainty I had heard for weeks had completely disappeared. 3 days later, something else happened. Several family members reached out to me. Apparently Ashley had been discussing future plans with relatives long before any legal review took place. Plans involving property, future sales, financial decisions, even living arrangements. Most of those plans now appeared impossible. People were starting to ask questions. Questions Ashley couldn't easily answer. Around that time, I stopped by Daniel's house to collect a few personal keepsakes. No one argued. No one stopped me. But as I walked through the living room, I noticed several family photographs were gone from the walls. In the garage, I found 2 boxes labeled with my name. Nearby sat a donation pile that included some of Daniel's old jackets and college memorabilia. Nothing dramatic had happened. Yet standing there, I felt an unexpected ache. Daniel had been gone only a few weeks, and already parts of our family's history seemed to be quietly disappearing. The most surprising call came from my granddaughter, Emma. She was 21. Smart. Observant. Much more observant than most adults realized. "Grandma," she said carefully, "Dad told me something last year." My heart tightened. "Dad?" She meant Daniel. "Yes." I listened. "He said Grandpa had structured things a certain way for a reason." I closed my eyes. Even Daniel had known. Maybe not every detail. But enough. Enough to understand that Frank had been protecting something. Or someone. Me. That realization brought both comfort and sadness. Because the two men who had spent their lives looking out for me were gone. Yet their planning was still speaking on their behalf. A week later, Michael called with an update. The review was complete. Every protection remained intact. Every safeguard remained enforceable. And every assumption Ashley had built her plans around had collapsed. The legal battle she expected never happened. There was nothing to fight. The documents were clear. The facts were clear. The truth was clear. And for the first time since hearing those cruel words after Daniel's funeral, I felt something unexpected. Peace. Because the final chapter of this story was no longer about what Ashley wanted. It was about what Frank had already prepared. A few months later, I found myself standing in a place I never expected to be. Peacefully. Truly peacefully. Not because I had won. Not because someone else had lost. But because the truth had finally settled where it belonged. The legal matters were finished. The trust remained intact. Frank's wishes were honored exactly as he intended. There were no dramatic courtroom scenes. No shouting matches. No grand acts of revenge. Just documents. Facts. And the quiet strength of preparation. In the end, Ashley moved forward with her life. So did I. We rarely spoke after that. And honestly, that was for the best. Some relationships aren't repaired by one conversation. Some distances exist for a reason. For a long time, I thought losing Daniel would be the hardest thing I would ever endure. In many ways, it was. Not a day passes when I don't miss my son. Sometimes I still reach for the phone on Sunday afternoons. Sometimes I still catch myself wanting to tell him something. A funny story. A family update. A memory. Then reality returns. And I remember he's gone. But I also remember something else. Daniel loved me. Frank loved me. Neither man left me unprotected. That realization became one of the greatest comforts of my life. One crisp autumn morning, I visited the cemetery. The trees had started turning gold and red. I brought fresh flowers. One bouquet for Frank. One for Daniel. I stood there quietly for a long time. The wind moved gently through the leaves. As I looked at Daniel's headstone, I remembered a small moment from years ago. We had stopped at a roadside diner after running errands, and he insisted on ordering pie for both of us even though neither of us was hungry. We sat there laughing about nothing important at all. It wasn't a milestone or a life-changing memory. Just an ordinary afternoon. Yet standing there, I could still hear his laugh as clearly as ever. For the first time since the funeral, I felt no anger. No bitterness. Only gratitude. Gratitude for the years I had with them. Gratitude for the wisdom Frank left behind. And gratitude that I had listened before signing anything. As I turned to leave, I thought back to that night after the funeral. The night Ashley looked at me and said, "Grieve fast, then get out of my house." At the time, those words felt cruel. Now they felt strangely insignificant. Because that house was never what mattered. Money wasn't what mattered. Property wasn't what mattered. The people who truly loved me had already given me everything I needed. Their trust. Their care. And the courage to stand on my own when life became difficult. If there's one lesson I learned, it's this: when people show you who they are, pay attention. And when someone who truly loves you leaves behind wisdom, protect it. Because in the end, I didn't need revenge. The truth did the work for me. And that truth set me free.